So welcome to this Facebook Live on CFS and setting boundaries. So let's start with defining the word. Dictionary definition is a line which marks the limits of an area. In relation to people, I think of boundaries as the rules that relate to our values and limits. What's okay with you, what's not okay. Setting boundaries can be uncomfortable if you're not used to it. Some people avoid setting boundaries because they don't like conflict. But I think it's essential to our mental health that we learn how to do it. It's a healthy thing to do. And it's actually good for you and your health, especially if your energy is limited. It's good for others as well, because I think ultimately we don't help others by indulging in their nonsense, especially life's takers, to put it politely. I'll talk about people who give, people who take a bit later. But I'm sure you know what I mean by those people who take. Some people with ME/CFS are good at setting boundaries. Someone's saying it gets easier the more you do it. That's exactly right. But I know, having worked with lots of people with ME/CFS, that some people aren't good at setting boundaries. Maybe it's something that you weren't taught. You weren't taught how to set healthy boundaries. You weren't taught the art of clear, assertive communication. You weren't taught to express anger in healthy ways. It's very interesting when I teach people assertive communication and I talk about aggressive behaviour, passive behaviour and passive aggressive behaviour, and I ask people, how many of you recognise that at times you've done one or more of those kinds of behaviours? And people are able to laugh at themselves and recognise and to admit that they have exhibited those kinds of behaviours. Some people have clearly defined boundaries. Some of those people have healthy boundaries. Some people have unhealthy boundaries. Some people have poorly defined boundaries, and some people have no boundaries at all. I can remember one person I met who was on benefits, and she said that people would knock on, her neighbours would knock on her door, and she would give them her last bit of food, her last bit of money, even though that left her with nothing. I remember a friend who didn't have any boundaries really around drinking alcohol. He would, when he went out, he'd drink as much as he possibly could, until his doctor said to him, look, you really need to cut right back or even stop drinking, otherwise, you're endangering your life. And that's what he did. He actually gave up drinking. So boundaries apply to how we treat ourselves, the rules that relate to how we behave towards ourselves. For example, let's say someone says, I don't drink and drive, so if someone asks me to drive when I've had a drink, I say no. It also relates to how we allow others to treat us. So consider, when don't you set boundaries for yourself? So I'm going to give you a moment just to put your thoughts in the chat, just whatever comes up. What's an example of when you haven't set boundaries for yourself? So I can recall when I was younger, I would resist going to bed at a reasonable time. Even though I'd wake up feeling really tired, I was always hitting the snooze button. And I think if I ponder the reason for that, at some level, it wasn't really a conscious thing, but I think there was a fear of missing out. I felt that it was just a bit feeble to go to bed early. So just put your answer in the chat. What are examples when you haven't set boundaries for yourself? I'm just going to give you a moment to do that. Whilst you're doing that, I want you to also consider, what are the reasons that you don't set boundaries for yourself? So someone's saying, I used to go to bed late or go out when I was tired. Sure, we've all done that. What was the reason for that behaviour? Going to bed late, going out when you felt tired. Sometimes, we're making a choice. If someone says, hey, I've got a free ticket for my favourite band, then I might be tempted to just go out anyway, even though I'm feeling a bit tired. What are your thoughts about that? What are the reasons that you don't set boundaries for yourself? Next thing I want you to consider is, when don't you set boundaries in relation to others? What are the reasons for you not setting boundaries with others? I did ask this question in the Facebook group, and people said, I find it difficult to say no, I find it difficult to speak up, codependent, I'm a giver, I'm a helper. So let's have a look. when I feel obliged to do something because the person asking me is in a position of authority higher ranking than me. Okay, so I'm wondering if that applies to work situations. But I'd like you to consider, I remember working with a group of lawyers in one of the biggest law firms, and it was very interesting because I was training people in groups and we were talking about dealing with overwhelm. And one person in the group said, if I feel like I've got enough work on my plate, I say no to partners. And the other people in the group stared at this person in disbelief because they recognized that they never said no. That's something to consider, okay? It's hard to define why. Sometimes it's a lack of self-care or self-love, needing distraction from what I'm feeling. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, sometimes it does take a little bit of pondering. It's not automatically apparent what the reason is. I don't set boundaries when I don't want to let people down or disappoint them. So one little thing that I share with clients around that is this concept of there being three kinds of business. Okay, there's your business, there's my business, and then there's other business. Let's say business that isn't your business, my business, those things outside our control. So a concept I encourage people to embrace is that actually other people's feelings, although we might have some sensitivity to that, it's their business to deal with. Okay, so sometimes if I say no to someone and they have difficulty with that, that's their issue, and I have to maintain some sense of separation between myself and them and recognize that's their issue. I don't necessarily have to buy into that. That does take practice. Okay, so I want to share 3 steps to setting boundaries, and I use the acronym EAR. Okay, so the first step is to establish boundaries. The second is to assert or communicate our boundaries. And the third step is to remind people or maintain our boundaries. Let's look at those in a little bit more detail. In order to establish boundaries, we need to identify our values and standards. And I've talked about this concept of a PHB. Any ideas what PHB stands for? I'm going to give you a moment to have a guess. I know there's someone on the call who knows the answer, but if you don't know, or I haven't told you, any guesses what PHB stands for? So PHB stands for Personal Handbook. Okay, Personal Handbook. What I want you to imagine is that inside your head you have a set of rules and guidelines that relate to how you believe you should treat yourself and how you believe others should treat you. So I want you to imagine collecting them up and writing them all down so that you can actually see them, see what they are. Because whether you realize it or not, you do have a set of guidelines, and you have an operating system, a way you interact with yourself and others. So imagine getting clear on those so you can see them, you can scrutinize them and review them. And then imagine, and you can actually do this as an exercise, write them down, write down your revised rules in your personal handbook. So someone might have the rule, I respect myself and I expect others to treat me accordingly. Whereas someone else might have the rule, it's okay for people to walk over me as I want people to like me. Thing is, if we have values and standards, then we need to ensure that our personal guidelines, the way we treat ourselves and others, are aligned with those values and standards. So, for example, if you want others to respect you, you need to respect yourself. And if you think it's important to respect yourself, you need to have standards about how you treat yourself and how others treat you. You need to have standards about how you talk to yourself and how others talk to you, and to the degree to which you let them talk to you in certain ways. And you need to establish the consequences of what happens if you or others step over those values, rules, guidelines. So, for example, if you're not respecting yourself in some way, what's the consequence of that? If others aren't respecting you, what are going to be the consequences of that? So, for example, let's imagine you make a date to meet someone and they don't turn up. And they say, oh, sorry. And you make a second date with them the next day and they still don't turn up. What are the consequences of that going to be? Are there going to be no consequences? You just carry on having a relationship with them? Or are you going to address that issue with them, say, look, that's not okay? Or are you going to take some other action? That happened to me, that I made a date with someone, they didn't turn up. We arranged another date, they didn't turn up again. And one of those people, it was on consecutive days. So I just stopped bothering with that person. I thought, well, that's not a way I would treat someone, and I don't expect that from someone else. So I just cut them out of my life. I know someone who made a date with a guy and he didn't turn up. Next day, she contacted him and said, how come you didn't turn up? And he said, oh, sorry, I was at work and I couldn't leave work and my phone died, so I couldn't contact you. But note that she had to contact him rather than the other way around. They made a second date and he still didn't turn up. What did she do? Well, she ended up dating this guy for a year. And he messed her around for a year. She told me some of the things that he would do, which included not turning up for dates they've made. And eventually, she dumped him. But it took her a year. So, for example, if you are talking to yourself harshly, what are the consequences of that going to be? Are you going to carry on doing that, or are you going to work on your self-esteem? I have written a free report, 6 Steps to High Self-Esteem. So check out my website. It's in the download section. Someone saying, yeah, I wouldn't have contacted him. Good reaction. Okay. Well, you need to consider that we need to be honest with ourselves about our feelings and recognize that our feelings are valid and that where appropriate, we can share them. So, for example, if someone pushes in front of you in a queue at the supermarket, post office, and if you feel annoyed and the person says to you, you don't mind, do you? Then what do? Do you say, no, it's fine? Or do you say, actually, I do mind? If I have the belief that I should treat people with respect, then actually I need to integrate that belief and recognize that if I think that people should be treated with respect, I'm a person, therefore I should be treated with respect, and I will consider the consequences of not being treated with respect. If we have resistance to establishing or asserting a boundary, then we really need to look at our beliefs and values around that. So if someone believes I don't have a right to stand up for myself, or I should just put up with other people's behaviours, we need to look at where those beliefs have come from. So that's the second step, understanding where they came from. And if we recognise that this is not a helpful belief or value that's limiting us, then we need to take action to change it. It might be that you can do this on your own, or it might be that you feel that you need some help around that. So, for example, I talked about going to bed early. If my old belief is, oh, if I go to bed early, I'm missing out, then I might replace that with a new belief. Actually, going to bed earlier is taking care of myself. And if I do that, then I'm actually not going to be missing out on stuff because I'll have the energy to do all the things that I really want to do. If someone's a people pleaser, their old belief value might be, it's okay for me to be a people pleaser because I want people to like me. I need people to like me. Might replace that with, you know what, I don't need to be a people pleaser. It's okay if some people don't like me. There are going to be plenty more people who show up in my life who like me even when I'm not a people pleaser. So, step 2, asserting or communicating our boundaries. In order to assert our boundaries, we need to have self-respect. We need to have that self-confidence so that we can actually communicate. So you can build self-respect, you can build self-confidence, and you can learn communication skills. There's a great book. It's by Marshall Rosenberg, and it's about assertive communication. We need to learn to say no, and sometimes without explanation. If we explain, others will push back. If we're explaining ourselves, it's like we're justifying ourselves. Someone's saying non-violent communication. Thank you. That's the title of the book by Marshall Rosenberg. Thanks for that. So I've got 4 top tips for you, okay, in relation to asserting boundaries. Number 1, keep it simple. So a very simple structure for a communication is when you did this or when you did X, I felt Y. So when we made an arrangement to meet and you didn't turn up, I felt annoyed. Second tip is avoid getting into a debate. Your feelings are not open to discussion. I remember someone saying to me, I said that to someone, I felt annoyed, and the person starts saying, no, you don't. Just recognize you don't need to justify your feelings. You can say something simple like, that's what I feel. Or I remember working with a client and we practiced using the phrase, I stand by that statement. Okay, so you don't have to enter into a debate. Tip 3, watch out for diversion. So if you share your feelings about a particular issue, and if someone says something like, well, you annoyed me last week, okay, that's a diversion. And you can just say, look, right now we're not talking about that. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that separately. But right now we're talking about this issue, okay? Tip 4, if the discussion isn't getting anywhere, be prepared to withdraw, put the phone down, leave the room. Say to the person, look, I'm happy to discuss this when we're both in a more useful state of mind. So we're not putting the blame on the other person, we're just recognizing that the discussion maybe is getting heated and it's time to just press the pause button. The third step, as I say, is to remind people maintain boundaries. Some points to consider is that some people will respect your boundaries because they care about the relationship. They might react for a bit. I recently had to set some boundaries with someone and they reacted, but ultimately the relationship is strong enough and they recognized that what I was saying was reasonable. However, some people won't respect your boundaries. Some people will push, especially if your boundary isn't strong. So if your no sounds like a maybe, then they'll push for a yes. Consider what are the consequences of someone not respecting your boundaries. Are you going to put up with it? Are you going to call them out on it? Are you going to set them an ultimatum, or are you going to let go of them? Consider, do you really want those kind of people in your life? Consider that if people want something from you, are they actually making a request or a demand? If it's a demand, call them out on it. You can say something simple like, sorry, is that a request or a demand? You might say, if it's a demand, the answer is no. If it's a request, you need to rephrase it and I'll consider it. When someone does make a request, especially if you have a tendency to say yes, then first thing to do is to pause. Okay? Ask yourself, do I want to do this? And answer that honestly. And as I've mentioned, learn to say no without explanation. No is a complete sentence. I remember asking someone if I could borrow a book, and they said no, and they didn't explain. And I was pretty impressed with the directness of their communication. I actually like people who are clear and direct. I heard someone say once, the quality of your life relates to your yeses and your nos. And especially if you have ME/CFS, if you're saying yes when you know actually you need to say no, then you know that you're going to pay for that later. And actually some strategic no's can actually help you move forward. So remember, if we explain ourselves, others will push. I remember a friend saying to me when I had ME, he also had ME, practice saying no. And once you've got the hang of saying no, then you can say, I'll think about it, or maybe, we'll see. Okay? Consider that some people give, some people take, and some people find a balance. Some people give and take. Consider what's your tendency. I suspect that there are a lot of people with ME who are givers. They're people pleasers, they're helpers. Only the third is balanced. People who are able to give and take. Consider that takers love givers. They will seek them out. They will take advantage of them. One way of spotting a taker, ask yourself, would this person say yes if I made the same request to them? If the answer is no, consider, do you really want this person in your life? Consider that in terms of having a balance between giving and taking. When we receive, we're giving others the opportunity to experience the pleasure of giving. And martyrs are kind of tedious to be around, I think personally. So they're not life affirming because they're burdening themselves with giving, and there's nothing left for them. So avoid being one of those people. If you recognize that you are a giver, you need to start using the no word. So I hope that's given you some food for thought. I could talk much longer on this topic, but if you've got any questions, do post them in the group. If you're not a member of the group ME CFS Explored, check out that group, join the group, and you can just post a question in the group. But I want to ask you, what is one takeaway from this session? Get clear on my boundaries. Okay, and what are some specific areas where you think that would be useful? Okay, and before we finish, I just want to share that each week I offer 3 free strategy sessions, 1 per person. In that 1-hour session, we do 4 things. We will work together to clarify your current situation, what's working, what's not working. We'll identify a number of clear, reasonable goals. Number 3, we'll find out what's stopping you from achieving your goals. And I'll help you identify some things that you probably haven't thought of by doing a couple of audits. The 4th step is that we'll identify 3 simple steps to help you move forward towards your goals. I won't talk about the building resilience training that I deliver unless you ask me. That's a promise, okay? So if you'd like to know more about the free strategy session, email me at support@mecfsexplored.com. So let's finish with a very brief relaxation exercise. So what I'd like you to do is, only obviously if it's safe to do so, close your eyes. And I'd like you to score your calm on a level of 0 to 10, with 10 being very calm. Okay, so just note that in your head. Close your eyes, make sure you're comfortable, ensure your hands and feet are in a comfortable position. And I'm just going to share a very simple relaxation exercise. Some of you know this exercise. You can do this exercise or do another relaxation exercise of your choice. I'm going to describe the exercise before we do it for just a couple of minutes. So first of all, I want you to choose one of your hands, your left or your right hand. And I want you to focus on the little finger on that hand. And as you breathe in, you're going to say a word to yourself. It could be any word at all. Peace, calm, love, trust, or another word. And as you breathe out, you're going to say a different word. Okay? Could be peace, calm, love, or trust, but different to the first word. Or any other word you choose. Then you're going to go to the second finger and you're going to do the same thing. Your middle finger, do the same thing. Your index finger, same thing. Your thumb, same thing. And then you're going to go back to your little finger. If you lose your place, then just choose a finger and carry on from that place. If you catch yourself thinking about something, just let go of that thought as if it's floating off in the cloud and go back to the exercise. And I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. So let's just do that for 2 minutes, starting from now. Okay, so that's 2 minutes. So I'd like you just to clock what score you are now on the scales of 0 to 10 for calm. And just put in the chat what score you were at the start, before the relaxation session, what score you are now. Okay, so if you've got any questions, as I say, do feel free to post in the group. If you are watching on YouTube, do like if you found the video helpful, and subscribe if you'd like to be notified of content as it is posted. Do join my Facebook group, ME CFS Explored, for more tips, ideas, inspiration. Click the link below. Thanks for watching. Wishing you great health. Bye for now.